They brought her to the clearing at sunset, when the sky glowed the same gold that waited beneath the earth. The pit had already been dug shallow, wide, lined with stones warm from the day's heat. At its center, honey pooled like molten amber, thick and shimmering, catching the last light as if it were alive. The air around it hummed with the low drone of insects, drawn to sweetness they did not understand. Lale stood at the edge, her wrists bound in soft linen, her skin oiled until it shone like polished bronze. Priestesses circled her, their hands dripping with honey, their chants rising and falling like breath. To the crowd gathered beyond the torches, she looked blessed, chosen by the gods of fertility to bring abundance back to dying soil. But her trembling legs told another story.
A priest stepped forward, lifting a bowl carved with symbols of womb and harvest. "The earth hungers," he declared, "and she will feed it." Two attendants lowered her slowly, carefully, reverently into the golden pit. Warm honey climbed her ankles, her knees, her ribs, heavy, clinging, impossibly sweet. Above her, the chanting grew louder. This was not sacrifice. This was transformation, turning a living woman into an offering the gods demanded to taste.
Long before Lele was chosen, long before the honey pits were dug, the people of the Fertile Crescent believed sweetness was the language of the gods. Honey was not merely food, it was immortality. Cured by sunlight, priests called it the breath of flowers, a gift that never spoiled, a substance that outlasted flesh, bone, and time itself. In myths carved on clay tablets, the gods of fertility fed on honey the way humans fed on grain. And in return, they blessed the land with rain, crops, and children. But when the rains failed, sweetness turned sour. Entire villages watched the rivers shrink into mud. Wheat fields withered. Into dust, animals grew thin. Mothers prayed over empty cradles. In desperation, the priest of Hanahana, the mother goddess of birth and harvest, declared that the earth had grown barren because offerings had grown weak. The soil remembers sweetness. They warned, and we have given it none. Thus began the age of honey rituals. At first, they were harmless, bowls of honey left at shrines, cakes baked with petals and placed beside sacred trees. But famine worsened, and so did faith. Honey became a gateway, a way to speak to the divine through scent, texture, and sacrifice. Priests realized something chilling. Honey preserved everything it touched. Fruit, flowers, even flesh remained intact beneath its golden seal. Preservation became proof. If honey could keep a thing from decaying, then surely it could carry prayers intact to the underworld. Over time, a belief emerged that honey could transform the body itself, softening it, sanctifying it, turning mortality into something the gods might consume. Women, seen as bearers of life, were considered the most potent offerings. Their bodies symbolized the womb of the earth. Their suffering, priests claimed, sweetened the soil. The honey burial ritual began as symbolic theater. Women volunteered to step into shallow pits filled with warm honey for moments at a time, emerging coated in gold, praised as living offerings. But symbolism was not enough to stop famine. And fear, once rooted, grows like rot. Under a high priest named Daganaryu, honey became not just sacred, it became a weapon. Records describe him as a man with hollow eyes and a voice that dripped like nectar. He believed the gods needed offerings that mirrored their own divine nature, sweetness drawn from living flesh. To him, a woman was the perfect vessel, warm, fertile, fragrant with life. Honey did not merely preserve her, it remade her. He introduced the burial of sweetness, a ritual meant to nourish the land with purity. Women between 13 and 20 were chosen during times of scarcity. Officially, they were honored, paraded through villages with garlands of lilies, blessed with songs, declared brides of the earth. But in private, they were examined, washed, and prepared as though they were offerings to be consumed. Honey was thought to reveal a woman's spiritual essence. If she was pure, it embraced her gently. If she harbored doubt or sin, it tightened around her body, drawing out the truth. This superstition became doctrine. Fear disguised itself as devotion. Layla grew up hearing the stories. Girls whispered about honey graves the way others whispered about monsters. Some said the chosen. Women did not scream. Others said they begged until their throats filled with sweetness. One claim appeared again and again. The gods always accepted the offering. But no one spoke of what happened after. No one dared. Honey, Daganaryu taught, was the bridge between life and divine hunger. He believed the gods desired not death, but transformation, the slow surrender of a living body into something sweeter than flesh. So when the drought returned with its cracked earth and empty skies, the priests looked at Layla. Young, strong, unblemished. They declared her blessed. The village declared her lucky. Her mother wept, and as the drums echoed across the valley, honey warming in the sun, the people clung to a terrible belief. If she sweetened the earth with her body, the gods would sweeten the sky with rain. But the ritual did not ask for faith. It asked for surrender, and honey has a way of revealing the truth no prayer can hide. Layla's preparation began long before the honey touched her skin. At dawn, she was led into the temple baths, where warm water scented with chamomile and crushed figs lapped at her ankles. Priestesses anointed her with oils meant to loosen the spirit from the flesh, rubbing them into her arms, her ribs, her throat, until her skin glowed like polished amber. They braided her hair with wax-dipped flowers that softened in the rising heat, releasing a sweetness that clung to the air. They fed her milk thickened with dates, insisting the gods required her blood to taste of fruit. She swallowed each spoonful with trembling lips, feeling the heaviness settle in her stomach. Every gesture felt ceremonial, yet beneath the tenderness lurked something mechanical, as though the priestesses were preparing a vessel rather than honoring a girl. By late afternoon, drums thundered through the village. Women gathered with offerings of wheat and wine. Men stood, silent, avoiding her gaze. Layla's mother pressed a kiss to her forehead, whispering, "Do not let them take your fear." But fear was already threading itself through her bones. As the sun dipped low, the procession began. Torches circled her, their flames casting trembling shadows. Across her face, priests coated her shoulders in warm honey, letting it drip slowly down her arms. The insects sensed it immediately: bees, gnats, and tiny beetles drawn by instinct. Children whispered that these creatures carried prayers to the gods. Adults knew they carried something else. The ritual pit waited at the edge of the clearing. Honey simmered within it, warmed by stones baked all day in the sun. Its surface rippled with lazy movement, thick as molten glass. When Layla approached, the heat rose like breath from an unseen mouth. Her legs shook, and for a moment she felt the world tilt. Priestesses supported her arms as she stepped into the pit. Honey swallowed her feet with a soft, sucking pull. It clung to her skin, wrapping her calves in golden weight. The crowd murmured prayers. Children leaned forward, wide-eyed. Layla closed her eyes, whispering the only prayer she knew, "Let it be quick." But the ritual was never quick. Honey climbed her shins, her knees, her thighs. Each inch felt like sinking into warm hands that refused to let go. The sweetness invaded her senses, thick, suffocating, too rich to breathe through. Priestesses chanted above her, voices weaving in spirals around the clearing. "Sweeten the soil, sweeten the womb, sweeten the breath that feeds the earth." As the honey reached her ribs, Layla felt pressure tighten around her chest. She gasped, air tasting like sugar. The world blurred at the edges, softening into amber haze. The pit's warmth seeped into her spine, numbing her limbs even as her heartbeat hammered against her throat. Then came the insects. Drawn by heat and sweetness, they crawled along her shoulders, her neck, her hair. Priestesses praised it as a blessing, messengers of the gods feeding upon divine offering. But Layla felt their legs skitter against her skin, tiny, relentless, devouring her helplessness piece by piece. Honey crept higher, cupping her breasts, sliding beneath her arms. She tried to lift her hands, but the sticky weight held them tight. Panic surged. "Please," she whispered, voice cracking. "Please let me breathe." No one answered. The priests added more honey, letting it cascade over her head in thick ribbons. It coated her ears. Muffling the chants, it dripped into her mouth, tasting too warm, too sweet, filling the back of her throat until she choked. The crowd watched in reverent silence as she struggled, only her eyes visible above the surface wide, shining, begging. Time stretched. Minutes became an hour. The heat turned suffocating. Honey seeped into her hairline, down her scalp, into the creases of her eyelids. Her breaths grew shallow. Each inhale tasted like drowning in sugar. Her mind began to fracture. Shapes swirled in the golden haze. Faces formed and disappeared. She saw women she had known, women she had never met, women whose names had vanished from record. Some reached for her. Others whispered through lips made of honey, "You are becoming the earth." The insects returned, drawn now not only by sweetness, but by motionless warmth. They covered her arms, her neck, her cheeks. She felt their legs moving in waves. The crowd interpreted her shudder as divine acceptance. Her heartbeat slowed. Her vision dimmed. The world narrowed into color and sound, amber light, humming wings. Distant chanting. Through the thickness drowning her ears, she heard the high priest declare, "She blooms." And in her last moment of clarity, as honey pulled her downward, as insects gathered like a crown around her face, Layla exhaled a breath that trembled like a fading flame and thought, "I am becoming earth. I am becoming sweetness. I am becoming gone." The chanting swelled. The drums thundered. Honey stilled. The ritual was complete. But death was not the end of her offering, for the priests believed sweetness ripened in darkness, and the earth was hungriest after silence. When the chanting stopped and the torches dimmed, the priests covered the pit with woven mats and packed earth until the ground looked whole again. Villagers returned to their homes, believing the gods had heard them. But beneath the soil, Layla's body lay suspended in honey, the warmth slowly fading, the sweetness thickening around her like a second skin. The priests taught that in darkness, the offering transformed. Honey did not rot, it preserved. It softened. It turned flesh into something closer to wax than death. For weeks, the mound was left untouched. The villagers avoided it, unable to decide whether they feared disturbing a sacred grave or feared discovering what was left. Inside, only the priests visited, leaving bowls of milk and petals on top of the soil, whispering prayers into the earth, according to their doctrine. The honey drew the life from the offering and fed it into the ground like nectar moving through a hive. On the night of the new moon, the priests returned with bronze tools and clay jars. They dug carefully, peeling away layers of earth until the mats appeared. When they lifted them, a wave of sweetness rose, dense, warm, strangely familiar. Even the most devout priests paused, swallowing hard. The scent was no longer just honey. It was something human infused into amber, something both living and lost. Layla's body was intact, preserved as though time had hesitated. Her skin, once bronze, had turned pale gold. Her hair floated in the thick honey like dark silk. The insects had drowned with her, suspended in silence. Her lips were parted slightly, as if she had tried to speak one last sentence that never reached the air. The priests considered this beauty a sign of divine acceptance. They scraped the honey that surrounded her into jars, mixing it with herbs to create sacred ointments. They rubbed it onto the fields, believing it would teach the soil to bloom. They anointed barren women with it, hoping sweetness could coax life where life refused to grow. Some families swore the ritual worked, pointing to sudden pregnancies or unexpected rains. Others whispered that the land felt different, that something beneath the crops watched them. But the truth of Layla's suffering faded quickly. Over generations, the ritual softened into myth. Villagers told children that honey graves were gentle, that chosen women drifted peacefully into the earth. No one spoke of the insects, or the panic, or the sweetness too thick to swallow. Centuries passed, the village crumbled, the temple collapsed. But the honey pits endured, dark amber pockets beneath the soil, sealed by time. When archaeologists uncovered them, in the early 20th century, they expected burial urns or offerings of grain. Instead, they found honey still clinging to the walls of the pits, viscous and glowing under their lanterns. In one grave, they found the preserved form of a young woman, hair intact, ribs visible, skin wax-like. The reports described her as unnervingly peaceful. But one researcher wrote privately, Her hands were clenched, her jaw was strained. She did not die gently. The official publication omitted those lines. Fragments of tablets near the site revealed depictions of women submerged in honey, their bodies surrounded by symbols of fertility. Scholars argued for years whether these images were literal or metaphorical. Some insisted they represented agricultural cycles, not human sacrifice. Others claimed the pits were accidental preservations. But the honey itself told a different story. Tests revealed traces of human proteins, herbs used only in ritual offerings, and a strange compound formed when honey mixes with living flesh under heat. The past had left its truth sealed in sweetness. Today, exhibits display the artifacts under soft lights. Visitors lean close, marveling at honey that has survived millennia. They comment on its golden glow, its purity, its beauty. Few ask why it smells faintly of warmth, or why the glass cases fog slightly as if something inside is still trying to breathe. Curators speak of ancient beliefs, of rituals tied to fertility and fear. They avoid the details. They do not mention that every preserved body in those pits belongs to a woman. They do not mention the clenched hands. They do not mention the sweetness that lingers long after the exhibit is closed. And yet, sometimes when the museum is quiet, when the lights dim automatically for the night guards swear they catch a scent drifting through the halls, not incense, not flowers, something warmer, deeper, a sweetness touched by breath, the kind of sweetness that does not come from honey alone,